Founder FM. You're listening to Founder FM with your host, Graham Brown.
Hello and welcome. My name is Graham Brown. You're going to enjoy our next guest. She's an entrepreneur, but she also describes herself as international broadcaster, humanitarian speaker, meditation guide, and founder of Epic Things in the World. Welcome to the show, Anita Wing-Lee.
Thanks, Graham, for having me. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. Where are you in the world today, Anita?
I am in Miami right now for another 5 days.
5 days, and then you're off on your travels again, right?
Yeah, to Atlanta, and then to British Columbia, Canada, and then off to Europe for a couple months.
Right. You seem to be moving around a lot. You've done quite a bit of traveling in the last few years. What's on the program? What's going on?
So the way I've traveled has definitely morphed and changed. The big thing that I'm doing this year is called Project SoulFam, and I'd spent a couple months building up an online business and a blog and a platform. Actually, I spent a year and a half doing this. And then at a certain point, I just realized I could make them. What if instead of just sitting at home and trying to, make things work online in order to make money, I did something tangible with my hands and feet. So I actually sold some of my most prized possessions, auctioned off my books, and crowdfunded and packed my life up into one luggage and one backpack and one handbag. I've since downsized, so I no longer have the handbag. I just have two things. And since December 29th, 2015, I've stayed in not 100, I haven't gotten there yet. I've stayed in 20 different homes, beds, air mattresses, couches, like couch surfing, living in the homes of my online community, especially my Periscope community. I've been to, 4 countries since the year began. Doing a lot of humanitarian work and really kind of revolutionizing the way that people think about how they can make a living doing what they love.
Right. That last part's really interesting. So we'll just retrace a little bit because there's a lot of interesting things that you mentioned. Periscope, crowdfunding. We'll talk a bit more about those in a minute. So let's sort of understand for the listeners what it is that you do. You built a brand around yourself, which is Anita Wing-Lee, and you have the website, right? Which put all the details in the show notes. And you have all these projects that you're involved in, the humanitarian projects, the meditation projects, and so on. And you crowdfund your activities. So tell us a little bit about that. Give us an example so people can understand what crowdfunding is.
Yeah, and I'll just say the reason why I had really committed to wanting to build an online business, online marketing. If anyone is familiar, for those who are familiar with it, it's online courses, it's coaching, it's masterminds, it's, sales funnels, it's lead pages, it's all these things that you can do to build an online audience and then quote unquote monetize them. But I realized that model of constantly trying to do internet launches, launch another product, that felt really icky to me. It just was I don't like the idea of trying to build an audience so that I can sell to them, and get that, 3% conversion and make enough in order to live the life that I wanted. And so I thought, I undid that from my psyche, and I sort of started from scratch. And I realized that what gave me joy was when I came up with ideas that I knew would help my audience, my online audience, and then I just implemented them. And then I figured out afterwards how I could, potentially fund my life from them. And it's been a couple months that I've been doing this now, and I'll give a really concrete example of the thought process that I go through that allows all of this to happen, because it's actually quite a miracle. If someone told me that you could do this, I would be like, no, you can't. That doesn't make any sense. But I'm living it and doing it. So in January, I'd been invited to speak at the second Periscope Summit which is the world's largest gathering of live streamers in the world. And for anyone who's not yet familiar with Periscope, it's a live streaming mobile app owned by Twitter. It was App of the Year in 2015. It's the fastest growing live streaming platform. And it's really powerful because when you can live stream, it's like having a FaceTime or Skype call with someone on your phone. But you can also type in the chat and communicate with them. So it's raw, unedited, in real time. And I love it because it's a place where you really get a feel for someone and whether you like them or not. Because it's like, there's no glitz and glam. It's just them.
Unedited.
And, yeah, exactly. And so I built a community on Periscope there of, at the time it was small. There was maybe like 6,000 or 7,000. But I was invited to speak at the summit for my work leading meditations on Periscope. And I was in Toronto at the time and I needed to get to San Francisco. And I could have bought a flight from Toronto to San Francisco, but I started to realize that I was talking to people about my life and there was things going on with my family, and it seemed like it was time to leave. It was time to leave home and like change environments and set off out into the world the way I'd always wanted to, instead of sitting at home trying to like plug away at online marketing. And so I'd been talking to my audience very openly, actually, about like the issues I was having with some of my family members and how it wasn't really serving me. And people were like, Anita, if you ever need a place to stay, you can come to my place in New York. You can come hang out with me in Ohio or Chicago, and sometimes like online people would just say that, but you don't really take them seriously. But because I'd been like sharing my story with my audience for quite a while, and and then the big question of my year, my life, everything, is what would happen if we stopped worrying about our money and careers and we woke up every day asking, how can I serve? So the way I make my decisions, what projects or products I put out into the world, is how can I help serve my audience? Like, how can I help them? What could I create that will benefit them in their lives and will genuinely help them based on what they're telling me about their problems that they're going through? And so I started to realize, like, I could pay the $400 to go on this, to go from Toronto to San Francisco. Or what if I took a road trip from Toronto to New York and then across America to all these places that people had offered to host me? And I did these free meditation workshops, donation-based meditation workshops, and fundraised money to help the refugees in Europe and in Syria and in that area. And so I had no idea if it would work. I thought, if the road trip doesn't work and I end up having to pay more out of pocket than I would to fly, so basically that $400 difference, right? Maybe I'll end up having to pay more, maybe it'll be less, who knows? But I took a chance and I sold my stuff, I crowdfunded, and then I did these donation-based meditation events at 5 cities across the country. And we definitely raised more than $400. Collectively, I think that entire road trip, we raised like $3,000 versus if I had paid. So this is the difference. I would have paid, I would have lost $400 taking the flight. And instead, because I took a chance and I trusted my audience and I showed up and I just took this leap to ask my community to support me as I'm doing something good in the world, we had a surplus of $3,000.
Wow, congratulations. So you got your community, your followers, the people that follow you on Periscope and the other platforms, to crowdfund your project, right? Your travels.
Yeah, essentially that one, people could donate directly online if they just wanted to support me. But actually, we raised $3,000, but I probably received much more than that because people actually donated flights to me. Some people drove me. Some people donated train tickets. I had 3 flights donated on that journey, 9 cities across America. This is a 15-day road trip. Not a road trip, I guess, because we took planes, trains, and automobiles across America. But yeah, when I put it out there to my audience that this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to change the world. And I need to get across the country somehow. And I need this leg covered. I need to get from Atlanta to New Mexico. Does someone want to help me? What should we do?
So were you surprised by the generosity or the donations of people?
Yeah, completely blown away. I think even now I'm a bit more used to it. We just had a successful Kickstarter for our book about my work with the refugees called The Soul of Humanity. But still, like, I'm still blown away. Someone donated, like, there was one donor donated £15,000, which is over 2,000 US dollars, which like blows me away. But I think, you know, it makes me really humble, and it just makes me even more committed to doing this work, because I don't do it for me. I've proven that it doesn't cost me very much to stay alive. I don't have a lot of stuff. As long as I have a Wi-Fi connection and a roof over my head, I can help make a really big impact in the world. And so I think people see that and they trust that, and I'm genuine about it. And so that it inspires them and they want to be a part of that. So it still blows me away, but it just makes me like more committed to using my resources more wisely and really showing people, because they've put their trust and their hard-earned money to support the work that I put out into the world.
How important is Periscope as a tool within that whole value add, that whole community?
For me, it's 90% of the community building. I can definitely say that other people, like I know of other creators, YouTubers, artists, musicians who have an audience who support them online in a similar capacity. But for me personally, Periscope was the thing that really launched it, because I chose to be open about my story and my life through this live streaming platform. You know, some people have done it through blogs and they've built that up over time, or YouTube channels, building that up over time, and then they get really good at editing videos, right? But that was never me. You could say I was a little bit late to those games. But with Periscope, it's still new enough. Like with Periscope, I think it's going to be a year old a day, like 3 days from today. That's a 1-year anniversary. So it still hasn't quite hit that mass market point. But there's, you know, if you're listening to this now, download the app. It's a blue,
for
white
sure
icon, and just play around with it. Get on it, because it's like having your own live YouTube channel. But at the same time, the reason I call myself an international broadcaster, because there is no definition yet for this. You know, I'm not quite a journalist and I'm not quite a TV host, but I'm all of those things and so much more, because I'm also kind of like the girl next door who's your best friend, and I'll stay up late. Like, we can watch movies and talk about life. But at the same time, like, I have enough of a vision that I don't just sit at home and, you know, talk about life and watch movies. I go out into the world and I do these big things, and it's caught people's attention.
Let's talk about that, because let's talk about the numbers on Periscope. The last time I had a look, you can correct me on this, 17,000 followers and about 6 million likes. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 15,000.
Oh, sorry. By the time this goes out, it's going to be more than 17,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think 6 million plus hearts.
Right.
Yeah.
So 6 million. So that's people actually interacting with your content, right? Why would you not be attracted to something like YouTube? Because that seems like the obvious choice to build a community, right?
To be honest, it's just, I tried. Like, I love video. I'm totally a visual person. And one day I do want to get back into creating really high quality videos. The thing with Periscope is that if you want to broadcast to the entire world, you press like the broadcast button, and then a red start broadcast button will come up, and you press start broadcast. And you do that consistently, and people will show up, and you can reach people from all around the world. Whereas YouTube, like, if anyone's actually tried to upload a YouTube video before, you know that you need to upload it, put a title, put all this other stuff, get annotations, you know, put in some SEO, put in some links and a description. And then that doesn't even include your video. If you want a really high quality video, like, it's not just you talking to a camera. You need the lights, you need a good camera, all that stuff. So I actually love YouTube. It was just never my thing. You know, like I said, I got on Periscope about 8 months ago, when it was new still, and it is still new, whereas YouTube has been around for a couple of years now. If I just, you know, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. If I had gotten on YouTube when it was 4 months old and I ran with it, I'm pretty sure I would be like, yes, YouTube.
Right.
But it's just, yeah.
But it seems to suit your character as well, because Periscope seems to be, because it's live, because it's unedited, it's much more intimate and open and honest, isn't it? And that seems to suit your character, whereas YouTube, you can professionally produce the whole thing. I wonder if it, maybe certain types of entrepreneurs are suited to certain types of mediums, right?
Exactly.
If maybe some people are uncomfortable with just turning the phone on and just talking straight to camera, right? Maybe some people are better, with the whole thing produced, but, some people really thrive in the environment where they can relate to their audience on a one-on-one basis. So I'm wondering if that kind of really suits the way that you come across with your audience.
Yeah, it does. And I know some people be like, oh, but maybe that's not for me, especially sometimes with entrepreneurs, we think that from what I've, like the entrepreneurs that a lot of the entrepreneurs I met, there's a section of entrepreneurs that kind of hide behind their brand. And it's like, oh no, like I'm not here to be the face of it. Like I'm building this brand, this business, this storefront. And I understand that it's true. It's not everyone's calling to be the face, of the brand and of the empire, like whatever they feel called to build. But I will say, just from personal experience, it's something worth try putting out there. Because I actually, I say often, like, people don't follow brands, they follow people. Like, let's face it. Do we really care that much about Apple as a brand, or is like hearing Steve Jobs' story more inspiring? It's Steve Jobs' story, right? And it's the same thing with Microsoft. Like, does anyone ever talk about the history of Microsoft's growth? No, if anything, they're interested in like, how did Bill Gates get started? And so, and I personally, part of the reason I wasn't always this open with my life and my story online. When I started out, I was like, what am I supposed to blog about? I don't want to talk about, I don't want to get in trouble for blogging about certain things. But I've like definitely, like, all of those fears are gone now, because I've seen the power of just being vulnerable and being yourself. Because the truth is that whether your customers, your audience, they're humans first. Like when you come to them just as consumers and try to figure out like, what's the marketing psychology behind them? How can we push their buttons so that buy? Like, personally, that just never resonated with me. But because I come out to people with like, yeah, I'm human too. These are the things I struggle with. And, sometimes it's not even me talking about the projects that I work on. Sometimes it's my late night, it'll be like a late night broadcast talking about how I haven't talked to my old best friends in a long time because I travel so much. Like, these are things that people can relate to. And all I can say is like, it's worth a shot, because you've got to recognize like that everyone else is a human. And it's actually a good practice, because it keeps me now, whenever I meet people that in the past I might have been a bit starstruck with, like I'm so used to navigating that ground now between like, people might look up to me and be like, oh, how does Anita do all of this? But I know, because I'm actually open with my story. I don't try to pretend I'm perfect. I know that it makes it so clear to me now that anyone else, even if they pretend they're perfect, like they're still going through stuff. So it makes it easier for me to relate with people, and it makes it easier for people to relate with me. And, ultimately, this is actually why my life and one of my projects is called Project SoulFam. It's this idea that we are all, I say often that I don't have followers, I only have family. And this is like not just something I say, this is something I really live. Like, I live in the homes of my Periscope following. Right. They are my family, yeah.
So you have to put yourself out there quite, you have to do it. And I think the word that you used is really interesting, vulnerable. Because that, in a way, it goes against a lot of the conventional wisdom that we get taught in business school. It goes against what people understand when, they learn to become a business person. They become an entrepreneur. They build a business. They create these walls around themselves. They sit in the big corner office with the high back chair. They didn't do an MBA to go out and talk to customers, right? That's the kind of thing that we learn in the business community about building these big brands. You seem to be going in the opposite direction, which makes you a maverick in that world. Yes. So I'm sort of curious to know how people, obviously your audience are your family are very supportive of you, but how, you have people in your network who went to business school, you went to business school. What do they think about what you're doing when you talk about this kind of work?
That's a very interesting question. I would like to know the answer to that too. I haven't quite come full circle to the point where like I'm covered in my business schools magazine. Because I went to like a really like a traditional ritzy business school in Canada, and I am a total maverick. Even then, I was the girl who showed up to like I showed up to class with like neon blue tights and Transformers t-shirts, and all the girls are in their, you know, fancy Aritzia and like Zara outfits. But I think I started to realize, you know, in this journey, I did a lot of traveling actually when I was in business school. And I got really involved in social entrepreneurship and social enterprise and this idea of business as a force for good in the world instead of just for the profit line, for the bottom line. And it really inspired me. And as I've been on this journey, I've met so many other social entrepreneurs, like people who believe in using business as a force for good, that I know that I'm not alone in this. And I know that there are other people who are working in this, you know, on this border between this new way of funding artists and funding amazing projects, and instead of just sitting in jobs or like the traditional way. So I know that there's other people like me out there. And the more that I do this and I come out more publicly with this work, the more that I'm able to find these people and collaborate with them, you know, like the people who start co-working spaces, the people who are like Bitcoin, who are into Bitcoin and new forms of funding and finances. It's fun because now I get to be on the cutting edge of this stuff instead of, you know, sitting back and being like, oh no, like this is the way it is. So these are the rules I've got to play with. Instead, I really believe now, like, one of the things I actually daily challenge myself with the next projects that I work on and the things that I build, instead of just being like, okay, this is what people do for marketing campaigns, so let's follow their blueprint. Like, I really challenge myself to think, okay, if I knew I had all the money and all the funding in the world and all the resources, what would be the way that I could get this project out into the world so that it could reach the most people?
I'm really fascinated by your story. I think you are in a very exciting space. It's a very new space. There seems to be very few rules, and it's really an open book for people who want to come and, you know, write their own story. And I think that adds up to, you know, a very attractive proposition for a lot of entrepreneurs who maybe haven't even quite yet discovered that this is possible. But I'm curious to know is that because there are no rules, because it's a new space, because it requires trailblazers rather than, you know, set paths to follow, that there must be a lot of challenges in what you do on a daily basis. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you face, maybe some that you faced recently, particular challenges that you have doing what you do.
Yeah, I think honestly the biggest challenge is the game that we play with ourselves in our heads. Because, you know, the thing that I have people come to me most and say, it's like, well, how do you pay for this or that? It's usually, or people feel like they don't have the time and money to do what I do. But I've proven that actually if we make the choices, we do have the time and the money. And so, and anything that I personally struggle with, it all comes back to like my head and how I feel about it. So I'm a really big advocate of meditations, and this is one of the big things that I live stream on Periscope. It's a big part of how I started giving value and how, like contributing to my audience's life by leading meditations for them on this app. And the reason I do this is because meditation is this incredible tool that helps you understand that you are not your thoughts. Like, you are the living, breathing spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, behind all of the thinking. And so even for me, like, you know, once in a while, sometimes I will have fears too. Like, literally before this call, I had to book a flight. And before I hadn't booked it because someone had donated part of the leg, but then I needed to get from Atlanta to Vancouver next. So I booked from Miami to Atlanta, because that was donated, and then I needed to get from Atlanta to BC somehow. And I try not to like spend the money that's been donated to me, depending on, because most of the money that's been donated to me, some of it is like actually like it was meant for me. They put it in my PayPal, but then a good chunk of it is like for the humanitarian projects that I work on. And so I try not to use that for like flights if I don't have to, because that way I can say to people, like, your donations, went to that. And so I was like avoiding, so I like hadn't bought this flight yet. And I was like worrying about it for the last couple of days and thinking about it. But this is where my meditation practice comes in, because worrying about anything never leads anywhere positive. It's more about like, okay, how can we come up with creative solutions? And I'm a big proponent of trusting the process. And so honestly, a lot of like when I come up against big challenges, instead of getting afraid or instead of getting overwhelmed, I come back to my micro meditation practice of being present, like being here. Eckhart Tolle in his book Power of Now talks about how like all of your problems are always in the future or always in the past. They are never in the present moment. And when I read that a couple of years ago, it blew me away, because I was like, oh, wait, it's true. All the problems that we think we have they don't exist. If you really, really focus on this present moment, guess what? Like, how much money you have actually doesn't matter right this moment. Like if someone's angry at you, like you don't have to let it bother you right this moment, because that's probably something in the past. And recognizing that has been a really powerful tool for me to create what I do. And it probably contributes to the fact that, I am a Maverick and I'm creating my own rules, because I don't have the baggage that comes from being afraid of what most people are afraid of. Like, I'm not trying to live up to anyone else's expectations, because I've like cleared myself of the fear of what other people think.
That's an interesting point. Do you think a lot about the future, or I know you talked about living in the present. A lot of entrepreneurs have the habit of living in the future, because, they'll never be happy until they make the first million, or, they've done 5 million in sales. How does it work with you? You seem to sort of be very engaged in the present, but do you have an understanding or any kind of idea about what this will be like next year? Does that sort of concern you? Will you still be able to do these crowdfunding projects in 3, 4, 5 years' time?
If you had asked me, a year ago, I would have been one of those entrepreneurs that tried to make a business plan, or tried to map out my next 3 years to see what it would be like. But honestly, like the last couple months especially have completely blown it out of the water. Like I never would have thought I would be doing what I am doing now. And it's like my vision grows exponentially, not stepwise, like exponentially. Because, and to answer your question about how like, will I still be able to crowdfund in 3 or 5 years the way I am? Well, actually Patreon didn't exist 3 years, these other, and for those who don't know, Patreon is like Kickstarter, except it's monthly pledges,
right?
Not just a one-time donation. So it's like in the olden days when they had literally patrons for artists. So there are people who get paid thousands of dollars a month by their audience for creating YouTube videos. And that doesn't even count like YouTube monetization. That's just from their audience. So I have full faith that when the time comes, like new platforms will be built. I mentioned Bitcoin before, and like, big brands are going to start paying more attention to like ordinary people like me who have really engaged audiences. Like again, like sponsorship is something that I'm able to explore now more. But I'm still very conscious of not quote unquote selling out, because I've always done things from a place of heart and from a place of service. So, but I still think about the future, but for me, it's like with a sense of excitement. And because I feel like I'm on this incredible magic carpet ride of following my passion and living my purpose. And so far it's proven to be way more epic than I had imagined. So I feel like anything that I imagine now, it's just going to be even like 10 times better 3 to 5 years from now. And like if in university, like nobody was talking about like, oh, you can crowdfund entire books. Like they were generally like, no, this is how the publishing industry works. And this is how you write an essay. But now that I'm out of that system and really like thinking for myself, I know that like solutions, other people are always coming up with solutions all around the world. And once you start putting yourself out there, you're going to find these amazing collaborators like I have, and then be able to create stuff together.
Yeah, for sure. And you really are going places. I think you've really grasped the nettle, so to speak, Anita.
And I think as well, I mean, let's put this into perspective. You're a wise head on young shoulders. You're 25 years old. So I think for a lot of people, those coming through the system will look at your story and think, wow, how can I do what Anita's doing? Or, that really inspires me to do something. And for the rest of us, those who are in business, entrepreneurs who've established businesses, we look at your story and think, wow, I need to up my game a little bit here. We need to see how all these technologies, the crowdfunding, the Periscope live streaming, when you talk about things like Patreon, which is, I never heard of that until I spoke to you, right? These platforms coming together, I start to think, well, it takes somebody who has a different worldview to see how these things can be used and put to use and create value for your audience and for your, your network, the people around you, right? Because what often is the case is when you've been trained or you grow up in a certain era and you see how business is done, you kind of look at things through that paradigm, right? I see Kickstarter as a way to, launch watches made in China to American consumers, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of my mindset, right? Even though I consider myself quite entrepreneurial, or Periscope as something that people do, when they're sitting in the car, driving along, rambling or complaining about traffic, right? That's kind of how I don't get it.
That too, yeah.
But that's how I don't get it, right? And as an entrepreneur, I see you using these things. I think, wow, actually, this is how it could be done. This is possible. So, you're 25 now, and as you said, like, in years to come, things are just going to get more epic. I see people like you as really pushing the envelope on how these technologies will work. You're going places. So, for people listening, this is a story. This is a lady that you need to follow on not just Periscope, but all the other platforms. But you need to watch this story because, how things have changed just in a couple of months compared to how things are going to change 6 months, a year from now. Wow. You're going places. We need to follow what's going to happen next, right? So where I'm coming full circle here, can you give us an insight into where you see this going in the next year? How you see all this coming together? What are the opportunities for entrepreneurs like myself, for listeners, entrepreneurs like yourself? What should we be paying attention to?
I think a big thing is genuinely, authentically building a community around, like I've done it around myself and my story, but you can also do it around a brand. And at the heart of what I do is I tell a really good story. And I happen to be telling my story. But I have a good friend as well, actually the co-author of our book, that was just funded on Kickstarter. He has a Facebook page that just blew up. Like if I had a dream for a Facebook page, I wish my page would blow up like his. Like within 30 days, he's got almost 5,000 likes. His post yesterday was shared 1,000 times. And we can't even entirely figure out how or why. But one of the things that both of us do well is we share a story. And it goes back to what I mentioned before. Like you really got to learn to see your audience, your quote unquote target market as people that you're here to serve. Do something because you want to genuinely help people and it's genuinely going to help people. And when you do it from that place, you're compelled in your heart and your soul to make it as best you can and to give people the best experience because you genuinely want to help them and you don't want to put crap out into the world. And when you come from that place, at first it's true. Like even me, like there are people who are genuinely also making more money on Periscope than I make. And they have fewer followers, so they're making more money. But it's like, I do what I do in the way that I do it because it resonates with me. And in return, though, I've got like a really loyal audience that comes back, and people have donated like 3-4 times to me. And then they host me in their homes, which, that in itself is can be worth thousands of dollars because they're feeding me like, if I had to pay for everything the way I'm couch surfing around the world. But to me, like, I don't care as much about how much money I make. What matters to me is like the impact I'm having on people's lives. And I know I can like hear someone's voice being like, yeah, well, they're like, inspiration doesn't always equal dollars. And it's true. But like, we get to choose the kind of people that we want to be in this world. This is something I say often, like, I want to be like the Angelina Jolie and the Mother Teresa of Periscope. Like, that's the kind of angle that I'm going for, you know, or like the Oprah of Periscope. Like a humanitarian, someone who's doing good and raising a lot of awareness and exposure for good things in the world and stands for something positive, you know, versus being like, you know, for example, like the Ariana Huffington of the world, where it's like, you know, you're a really savvy business lady. Who was the other one? Sheryl Sandberg. Like, you know, you're really savvy business lady, and like, that's great. But like, did you really revolutionize the way people think? And that's a choice we get to make. It's okay. Like, it's not like one is right or wrong. But personally, like, I feel like if you want to be on the cutting edge of really changing the world, just start with yourself. Start with like letting go of your own fears and sharing that story authentically. And it's true, it's going to be scary at first, but when you take those leaps, people are humans at the end of the day. People will have your back. Like, everyone has a soul family like out in the entire global world that will back them and support them, just like I have.
Well, Anita, it's been fantastic talking to you. Your story is an inspiration, and straight after this, I'm going to get on Periscope, download it, and you will be my first follow for sure.
Awesome.
So we'll start from small things. So keep doing what you're doing, because I think, you know, it's a really important reality check. What you're saying, the story that you're sharing is reality check for entrepreneurs. That, you know, often we kind of get lost in our own little worlds, the business world. We forget many of the lessons which you shared with us today about people being human, about being vulnerable and so on. It's the kind of the fuzzy stuff that we don't like to talk about, but ultimately that's what people connect with, isn't it? It's the emotion and the stories that people really buy at the end of the day. So I think that's a useful lesson for us. Draw us back, you know, back into what really matters. And I suppose in a way it makes us happier and more rounded as an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
And if we want to join you on your magic carpet ride, where do we go? Where do we find out more about you?
So if you definitely I Periscope, I live stream every day. My handle is at Anita Winglee, Winglee, for the last two words. I'm sure Graham will put it in the show notes. My handle's the same everywhere. It's just my name on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter. And then my personal website is anitawinglee.com. That's where my main blog role is. You can go back. Like, one thing, I don't know about you guys, but I love to go back and like read people's old blogs and see where they came from. That's all there. And then this year that I'm living of, you know, and the thing that's going to evolve into something so much bigger and greater. Like, one of the things, I don't think I properly answered this question actually, but I want to fill stadiums. Like, I want to fill stadiums with like really innovative, life-changing events and festivals that like really uplift people and change the way people live. That's one of my visions. That right now is a site called projectsoulfam.com. Which is a great place to just connect and get plugged in. And if you're interested in like helping and giving me a couch to surf, I've never said this on a podcast before.
Go for it.
You know, if this inspires you and you're like, oh my goodness, is this chick actually doing this? Check out projectsoulfam.com, see the ways that you can support this work. And if you're interested in bringing me to your city and we can collaborate and make something epic together, just fill out the contact form there and I'd be happy to chat with you more.
It's been great having you on, Anita. I feel that, as I said, I need to up the game a little bit here now. Maybe feel like...
Thanks, Graham, so much for having me.
Founder FM, voice of the entrepreneur. Find out more at www.founderfm.com.